Did WWE just cross a line that should never be crossed? Because what happened on Monday Night Raw wasn't just a spear, it was attempted murder on live television, and the fact that WWE is trying to pass this off as sports entertainment is absolutely disgusting. Paul Heyman, a 60-year-old man who's given his blood, sweat, and tears to this business for over 3 decades, was nearly sent to the hospital because some roided-up monster decided to use him as target practice. And where's the outrage? Where are the consequences? Instead, we're supposed to cheer and act like this is just another Monday night on Raw. This isn't just about one spear, this is about WWE's complete disregard for human safety, their obsession with shock value over storytelling, and their willingness to sacrifice legends of the business for cheap pops. What you witnessed wasn't wrestling, it was assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and I'm about to break down exactly why this incident should have Triple H scrambling to damage control mode. Let me paint you the picture of what really went down, because if you think this was just another wrestling move, you're either blind or you've been brainwashed by WWE's propaganda machine. Bron Breakker, all 230 pounds of pure muscle and reckless abandon, came charging at Paul Heyman like a freight train with broken brakes. This wasn't a calculated athletic maneuver, this was a man-child throwing a temper tantrum with potentially fatal consequences. The setup was simple enough. Paul Heyman was doing what he does best, cutting a promo that could sell ice to an Eskimo, talking about his client's business, when suddenly the lights dimmed and that generic rock music hit. Out comes Bron Breakker, looking like he'd been snorting pre-workout and anger management issues for breakfast. The crowd popped because they love violence, but what happened next should have had security rushing the ring and medical personnel on standby. Heyman tried to back away, you could see it in his eyes, that genuine fear of a man who knew he was about to become roadkill. But Breakker wasn't interested in talking, wasn't interested in building a story, wasn't interested in anything except turning Paul Heyman into a human pancake. He lowered his shoulder, picked up steam like a runaway locomotive, and delivered a spear so devastating that I'm convinced NASA probably detected the impact from space. The sound alone was enough to make your stomach turn. That sickening thud of flesh meeting flesh, of a man's body being folded in half like a cheap lawn chair. Heyman's feet literally left the ground, not in some graceful wrestling ballet, but in the way bodies fly when physics takes over and pain becomes the only reality. He crumpled to the mat like his spine had been replaced with overcooked spaghetti, and for a terrifying moment, nobody knew if he was getting back up. But here's what really grinds my gears, the commentary team's reaction. Instead of showing concern for a man who could have been seriously injured, they are calling it devastating and impressive like we just witnessed some 5-star technical masterpiece. Michael Cole is practically salivating over the replay, Wade Barrett is making jokes, and Pat McAfee is probably already planning his next TikTok dance about it. Where's the humanity in professional wrestling? Quick question for the comments, do you think WWE commentary teams are trained to ignore potential injuries, or are they just naturally heartless? I need to know what you think because this bothered me more than the spear itself. Let's talk about the man who delivered this potential career-ending move. Bron Breakker, son of Rick Steiner, nephew of Scott Steiner, carrying on the family tradition of being an absolute unit with the subtlety of a bulldozer in a china shop. This guy has been positioned as WWE's next big monster heel, and I get it, he's got the look, he's got the intensity, he's got that old school power that makes Vince McMahon's eyes light up with dollar signs. But there's a difference between being a convincing monster and being a reckless liability. Breakker's spear isn't just devastating, it's dangerous. We've seen him nearly decapitate other wrestlers with this move, but using it on a non-wrestler like Paul Heyman crosses every line of professionalism and common sense that exists in this industry. Paul Heyman isn't trained to take bumps like this. His body isn't conditioned for this kind of punishment. His reflexes aren't sharp enough to protect himself from a move that could legitimately end careers. This is a man who's battled health issues, who's not exactly in his athletic prime, who serves as a manager precisely because his in-ring days are long behind him. And WWE thought it was acceptable to let their newest monster use him as a crash test dummy. The liability issues alone should have lawyers working overtime, but apparently, nobody in WWE's front office has functioning brain cells anymore. What makes this even more infuriating is the complete lack of storytelling logic. Why did Bron Breakker target Paul Heyman? What's the motivation? What's the endgame? Is this supposed to set up some grand storyline, or did creative just decide that watching a 60-year-old man get destroyed would make for good television? Because if that's the case, WWE has officially lost the plot. Here's another question for you to debate in the comments. Do you think this attack was planned as part of a bigger storyline, or was it just mindless violence for the sake of shock value? And more importantly, does it even matter if there's no logical reason behind it? The aftermath was just as disturbing as the spear itself. Medical personnel rushed to check on Heyman, which should tell you everything you need to know about how legitimate the concern was for his well-being. This wasn't selling, this was genuine medical evaluation of a man who had just been on the receiving end of what could easily be classified as assault. Meanwhile, Bron Breakker stood there like some conquering barbarian, flexing and posturing like he'd just accomplished something heroic instead of potentially ending a legend's career. And the crowd? They ate it up like starving animals, cheering, chanting, taking videos with their phones like they'd just witnessed the greatest moment in wrestling history instead of what could have been a genuine medical emergency. This is what WWE has conditioned its audience to accept as entertainment, the potential serious injury of beloved personalities in service of manufactured drama. Paul Heyman eventually got to his feet, but you could see it in his movement. This wasn't a man who was perfectly fine. This was someone fighting through legitimate pain, someone whose pride and professionalism wouldn't let him show weakness even when his body was screaming for medical attention. The way he favored his ribs, the careful way he moved, the genuine grimace of pain that no amount of acting could fake, these were the signs of a man who had been legitimately hurt. But WWE's response? Business as usual. Cut to commercial, come back and pretend like nothing happened, move on to the next segment like Paul Heyman's well-being is just a footnote in their grand entertainment spectacle. No apology, no acknowledgement of the dangerous precedent being set, no indication that anybody in charge gives a damn about the safety of their employees. This brings up a bigger issue that WWE has been dancing around for years, their treatment of legends and part-time personnel. These are people who built the foundation that WWE stands on, who sacrificed their bodies and their health to create the empire that generates billions of dollars in revenue. And how does WWE repay that loyalty? By feeding them to the wolves whenever they need a cheap shock moment or an easy way to get heat on a new character. Think about it, when was the last time you saw a legend or manager get attacked in WWE and it actually served a meaningful purpose beyond momentary spectacle? These incidents happen with alarming regularity, and they are almost always forgotten within a week or two, serving no long-term storyline purpose while potentially causing very real, very lasting physical damage to people who've already given enough to this business. Drop a comment and let me know what other legends have been unnecessarily brutalized by WWE in recent years, and do you think there should be limits on who can be targeted for physical attacks? The most frustrating part of this entire situation is the wasted potential. Bron Breakker has genuine talent and could be a legitimate main event star with the right development and storytelling. But instead of building him up through meaningful feuds and character development, WWE is taking the lazy route of having him destroy beloved figures for cheap heat. This isn't character building, it's character assassination, both for Breakker and for the victims of his attacks. A real heel doesn't need to nearly hospitalize 60-year-old managers to get over. A real monster creates fear through calculated actions and psychological warfare, not through reckless violence that serves no purpose beyond immediate shock value. The great monsters of wrestling history, The Undertaker, Kane, Mick Foley as Mankind, they created terror through storytelling and character work, not by legitimately injuring people who couldn't defend themselves. What we're witnessing with Bron Breakker is WWE's continued descent into shock television at the expense of actual wrestling storytelling. They've forgotten that the best villains are the ones you love to hate, not the ones you genuinely want to see fired for being dangerous liabilities. There's a difference between heel heat and legitimate concern for performer safety, and WWE has completely lost the ability to distinguish between the two. The implications of this incident extend far beyond just one spear on one night. This sets a precedent that managers, legends, and non-active wrestlers are fair game for any level of violence, regardless of their ability to protect themselves or their physical condition. What happens when the next monster heel decides to target someone even older, even more fragile, even less prepared for this kind of assault? Here's what really needs to happen. WWE needs to establish clear boundaries about who can be physically attacked and under what circumstances. They need protocols in place to protect non-active personnel from dangerous maneuvers. They need to prioritize storytelling over shock value, and they need to hold their talent accountable when they cross lines that should never be crossed. But let's be honest, none of that is going to happen. WWE will continue to prioritize momentary social media buzz over long-term storytelling. They'll keep putting beloved figures in harm's way for cheap pops. And they'll keep pretending that reckless endangerment is just part of the show until something truly tragic happens that forces their hand. Final question for the comment section: do you think WWE will ever change their approach to protecting legends and managers, or will it take a serious injury to force them to implement safety protocols? And what would you do differently if you were booking Bron Breakker's character development? What happened to Paul Heyman wasn't wrestling, it was a preview of the lawsuit that's eventually coming WWE's way when their negligence finally catches up with them. The only question is whether they'll learn from this incident or wait until the consequences become impossible to ignore.